Hey you guys, it's Peter and welcome to my channel, Peter Likes Books. And today I'm doing kind of a different video over here. I was talking about this on my vlog last night, so for those of you that do not know, I have a feeling that most people that watch this channel also watch my vlog channel. But for those of you that do not know, I have a channel where I vlog every single day. I sit on my front porch and just kind of meander about life, meandering musings about life. And so I talk a lot about the TV shows that I watch and movies I've watched and books that I'm reading, and I just kind of pontificate about my life and memories of mine from my childhood and from my past, and I talk a lot about all different kinds of things, from grief to happiness, you know, and my recovery journey and all kinds of things. And so yesterday, I was talking about the book, and I actually think I've done a full review of this over here at some point, maybe last year. But I was talking about the book, The Comfort of Crows by Margaret Rinkle. And so I was like, maybe I should do this video where I talk about it over on my booktube channel. And so if you guys have not heard of this book before, this was actually, I believe it was Reese Witherspoon's September 2024 pick for Reese's Book Club. That was how I was introduced to it. And I bought it at that time. I thought the cover was beautiful. I just thought the book was absolutely beautiful. And at that time, all I knew was that Margaret Rinkle, and her name is spelled R-E-N-K-L. All I knew at that time was that she had been like Reese Witherspoon's like childhood teacher. And that was one of the reasons why Reese Witherspoon picked the book. I didn't really know anything about it. I knew it was nonfiction. I'm not a big nonfiction reader. This book kind of scared me, honestly, because as my mom got older, my mom passed in 2008. My mom was exclusively a fiction reader her entire life. But as she got older, she started reading a lot of like Anne Lamott, and she read a lot of nonfiction and spiritual musings and kind of things like that, you know, and just thoughts about the world. And so, I mean, she from time to time would read nonfiction books. The Way of the Pilgrim, I think, was one of her favorite nonfiction books. But she, you know, from time to time. But as she got older, she read more and more nonfiction. She would have loved this book. And so when I read this book, I was like, oh my God, it's just like, am I changing? Am I becoming a nonfiction person? Because at this time, after I read this, I started reading a lot of Joan Didion. I think I've read 3 of Joan Didion's nonfiction collections at this point. And I've read like 3 of Margaret Rinkle's books now. But I wanted to do a whole video about this because people ask me often, like, when should they start this book? Or when's the best time of year to read this book? And so for those of you that do not know, the book is called The Comfort of Crows, A Backyard Year by Margaret Rinkle. And so I don't know when I started this book. I think the book, if you read it the way that she wrote it, okay, which is not, you don't have to read it this way, but if you read it the way that she wrote it, it's broken down into 52 weeks, okay? And so each chapter, but there's like little chapters and there's beautiful artwork that I believe her brother does in the book. The artwork is amazing in here. And the book is broken down into 52 weeks. And so each chapter is a week. And when I started it, I don't remember when I started it, but I read it straight through. I read it like in a couple weeks, maybe 2 weeks or something like that. I would read like a couple chapters a night. So I did not read a chapter a week, okay? This book so profoundly changed. I don't know, like, you know, it so profoundly changed my life and just my perspective on the world. And it's a very simple book. It's not like this, you know, you see on the bestseller list these books that, like, you know, un-F my life, and, you know, and I read the synopsis of these books and stuff, and sometimes I'm like kind of confused in my head. I'm like, I don't really get the concept. I don't really understand it. Like, even The Secret, I loved that book years ago, but it was kind of even a little bit over my head. This is very simple, okay? It's what it is it's her perspective. It's Margaret Rinkle's perspective on life through essays that she writes, looking at her life and her world through the eyes of nature. And it's absolutely beautifully done, okay? And for those of you that do not watch my vlog, it also really, really inspired me to buy all these bird feeders and this bird seed, and now I know what a messy garden is, and so I'm not concerned with cleaning up my front walk this year or just letting the animals have it. I don't know, my whole perspective changed on the world around us. And for example, one of the things that she talks about in here is that, you know, I think we live in a time where we very much get caught up in social media and current events and what's going on in the world, as we should. We should, you know, be very knowledgeable about that stuff. But sometimes it can be heavy, right? Like, it can be really, really heavy. And she's talking about, she doesn't even talk about what it is that happened. She's talking about, she's leaving school one day as a teacher, and she's talking about, I think at that point she might be like substitute teaching. And I think she's leaving school one day, and it's like all this stuff is like heavy on her mind, right? Like, she just can't escape it. And so like on her way home, she goes to this park that she loves to go to. And it's just kind of like this nature walk-through park. And she's been watching for a long time this, like, I mean, literally for like a year. She's been looking at this like fallen tree, okay, that is now just like, you know, bark and all this kind of stuff. And she's been waiting for this African violet to like bloom in this tree, that it will only, or some kind of violet that will only bloom in this kind of it's kind of dirt that comes from like a tree, like decomposing, right? And that day that she's out there, she sees it. And she's talking about how like the world goes on without us. Like, I think she sees a deer that day too. And she's talking about like the birds will continue to fly and the deer will continue to eat. And they're not really consumed with the things that we get consumed with. And it like slows her mind down. And it's not like she's gonna not pay attention to that stuff or ignore it. It just is her way to re-enter the world and slow herself down. That was so helpful to me. Sometimes when I'm like seeing stuff and it's like online and people are fighting and arguing and it's too much for me. Sometimes I just step outside and I just look at our beautiful tree in the front yard, and it reminds me of this, of what she said in these books. And so it just is so helpful to me. And to be honest with you, I think the reason why this book so profoundly changed me is not necessarily her words, but it was her way of simply looking at nature that changed me looking at nature and getting excited about it. I think there was a part of me that was always kind of intimidated by nature. You know, because if I wanted to look at birds, I felt like I needed to know the name of every bird. Like I've said in my vlog, like I think that's a woodpecker, and somebody's like, no, that's a certain kind of cardinal, you know? And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I think there was like an intimidation that I had with not knowing what like a certain kind of tree was or a certain kind of bird was. And so when I read this, and you know, there's this one thing that happens. Well, after I read this one, I read her book, Late Migrations, which I liked. I didn't like as well as, they're still essays, but this is put together. The only reason I liked it less was because that one is just kind of all these essays thrown together, where this one makes sense. It goes through kind of a year. And so it's in like a very orderly fashion, but all of her writing is fantastic. And I believe that she writes for the New York Times. I follow her on Instagram. She has the most peaceful Instagram. She posts some of her essays over there. And her stuff comes up on my Instagram every once in a while. I'm like, oh my God, like it's just, I don't know, it just centers me. But this one day she's talking about something that she sees like in this, it's like an owl pellet or something. And she's like so excited about it, and she's taking pictures of it, but she's not sure if it is or not. And so she like takes pictures and she puts it on this like Facebook group, and she's like, does anybody else know what this is? This is like an owl pellet and all this kind of stuff. And it ends up being like, this is what cracks me up about it, or like her own humor in herself. It ends up being like this hair from the vacuum cleaner that her husband cleaned out. And he kind of wanted her just to believe that it was this owl pellet because she was so excited about it. And it's like, for me, that kind of dumbed it down for me. Like, I don't have to know everything, right? And I think like my intimidation of people that like, cause I live in an older neighborhood, and a lot of people do know like, oh my God, that's this kind of, it's, you know, a singing swallowtail or whatever. And I don't know the birds, right? But reading this book like made me realize I can just appreciate looking at a chipmunk running across, and I don't need to understand everything about it. And it slows the world down for me. And reading this book slowed the world down for me in a way that I just couldn't have imagined. I never expected it when I picked up this book. Honestly, I didn't even think I would make it through this book. This is nothing like I like to read. And I have recommended this book in the last year to more people than any other book that I've ever recommended, probably in my entire life, including To Kill a Mockingbird. This book profoundly changed me. And so when I was talking about it on my vlog, I was like, I think this book starts like, I knew it started around this time of year at some point. And so I was like, I think it starts in winter, like the first week of winter. And I was like, actually, I should do a video about this, because people ask me all the time, like, when should you read this book? And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to pull it down, and I'm going to start reading it again too. And I'm going to look and see when it starts, because I couldn't remember if it starts in fall or winter. Because like I said, it goes through like a week, and it's an entire year. It's 52 weeks. And there's little tidbits in between, like some of the weeks, artwork and little musings on life and things like that. But I was like, I'm going to look. And so it actually starts on the first week of winter. is the very first chapter. I remember it. She's talking about, because I can tell you, when I first read the very first chapter, well, I think there's a preface to it. Hold on. Yeah, because the preface is, wherever you are, hold on a second. It's called, Wherever You Are, Stop What You Are Doing. That's the preface. And then the first chapter is Winter Week 1, which would start on December 21st. And it's a Sunday this year. So for me, I'm going to go back and I'm going to read it this year a week at a time, because this book, so like, I read it and it helped me so much. But I think if I carried it through a whole entire year, it would greatly help me. I think, okay, the holidays are coming up. If you're looking for a great present for people, I mean, and this is the thing I would say to people, especially people who are interested like in gardening or birds or outside, they would love this book. But even people that aren't, like, she talks in there about like nesting and birds and like this bird box that she has and the birds that come back every single year and things like that. And at one point in there, she compares it to like her kids coming home, her son's coming home during the lockdown and leaving again. And it's musings like that she compares it to. There's a whole part in here. You know what? I think I read this actually when I talked about it. I'm never going to be able to find this chapter, but it's where she's talking about grieving. Maybe that's in Late Migrations. I think it's in Late Migrations. But she's talking about grieving, and she's talking about, as a girl that grew up, her writing is just, is phenomenal. It's beautiful. And she talks about, as a girl that grew up in the South, I think she grew up in Southern Alabama, and then moved to Tennessee. She talks about, as a girl that grew up like playing in cemeteries, that she should be very used to death. And then she talks about this one part. This is something that changed me. I do think this is in her second book called Late Migrations, but it might be in this one. She talks about, if it's in this one, it's towards the end, because it's when fall happens, which is where this ends. Her mom, they move her mom up to where they live, she and her husband, and her mom moves in across the street from her, and then her mom passes away. Well, when her mom moves she talks a lot about like plants that grow like in Alabama versus Tennessee and things like that. And so she, like, when her mom passes away, her mom had this plant that, I think it was like some kind of ivy or something, I can't remember. But like every fall she would bring it inside, and every spring she would take it outside. And she said that for like the last 3 years she had done that. Like, she had just, like, in the spring she would put it outside, and then in the fall she would bring it inside. And she said, not even really thinking about it, she's like, we live as if we have unlimited time. And it was like, it's just like small little phrases like that like profoundly, I mean, she said things that I already thought, but she said them in such a simple, eloquent way. To be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised. I mean, she is such a, I mean, people really look up to her as a writer, but her writing is like, I mean, I've never in my life, there's only a few people that even compare to the beauty of her writing. And it's simple. It's very, very simple writing. And it completely changed me. So if you're looking for a book to read that could change your life. Now, I will tell you, when I started this, the very first part of it, she's talking about like the water from the air going into the ground, and it takes care of the watering the trees during the winter. I was like, I'm so not into this. I am so not into this. Like, I do not care about this. Like, that's the kind of stuff that bores me. Like, I was like, I don't care about this. But then the more I was like, no, just keep up with it. By like the third part of it, which is like 10 pages into the book, she's talking about all these like musings on life. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. So let me read the synopsis to you. But like, this is what I was going to say. You can read it in like, one time like I did. I think I read it over 3 weeks or something like that. I'm going to this time, since I've already read it once, I'm going to read a week at a time, like a meditation book. Because like you guys, for those of you that watch my Peterisms channel, I love positive affirmations and meditations. But I'm going to read it a week at a time this time, because it so helped me last year. It slowed me down. It brought me peace and serenity, and it really, really helped me. So let me read you the synopsis. A luminous book that traces the passing of seasons, personal and natural. In the Comfort of Crows, Margaret Winkle presents a literary devotional, 52 chapters that follow the creatures and plants in her backyard over the course of a year. As we move through the seasons, from a crow spied on New Year's Day, its resourcefulness and sense of community, setting a theme for the year, to the lingering bluebirds of December, revisiting the nest box they used in spring, what develops is a portrait of joy and grief. Joy in the ongoing pleasures of the natural world, and grief over winters that end too soon and songbirds that grow fewer and fewer. Along the way, we also glimpse the changing rhythms of a human life. Grown children unexpectedly home during the pandemic, prepare to depart once more. Birdsong and night-blooming flowers evoke generations past. The city and the country where Wrinkle raised her family transform a little more with each passing day, and the natural world, now in visible flux, requires every ounce of hope and commitment from the author, and from us. For as Wrinkle writes, radiant things are bursting forth in the darkest places, in the smallest nooks and deepest cracks in the hidden world. I think that's at the very beginning that she wrote that. With 52 original color artworks by the author's brother, Billy Wrinkle, The Comfort of Crows is a lovely and deeply moving book from a cherished observer of the natural world. Fantastic book. Probably, in all honesty, and I think people know this, I talk a lot on here about, I just actually did a book about Harper Lee's, or did a video about Harper Lee's new book, and I said in there that To Kill a Mockingbird was my favorite book and movie of life, had changed me more than anything. In all honesty, I have to say this is probably second to Kill a Mockingbird. So anyway, if you've read this, let me know. I will tell you, I've also read Late Migrations by Margaret Wrinkle, and there's another, I ordered all of her books after I read this. And there was a third book of hers that I started reading, I'm like halfway through. All of her writing and all of her books is fantastic. I mean, you could take chapters of Late Migrations and it could fit right in here. It's the exact same kind of writing. Late Migrations it tracks like her growing up, going to college, and then like her grandparents, stories of her grandparents, tellings of her grandparents, her parents and things like that. It's more of a generational study. It's beautifully done. It just is kind of a little bit more all over the place than this is, but I enjoyed them as well. So anyway, her writing is just unbelievably life-changing and beautiful. So if you haven't read it, I would definitely check it out, and it would make a great gift. It would make a great holiday gift. So, The Comfort of Crows by Margaret Wrinkle. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.